Morning. It's August 24th, and I wanted to do a garden update. We hit the high 90s this week. We've had 90s every day this week, and we're getting 96 today. And these butternut squash are finally starting, the vines are finally starting to die out, which I was kind of glad of that, because I keep having to trim these big old vines back that's growing up the chair on my porch and all out into the front yard. But just to show you how nice these things are getting, that's a gallon milk jug. That's one of the biggest I've ever grown, and you can see they're loaded out through here. Multiple different sizes. We got some bigger than others, but there's 16 butternuts through these two plants. There's 2 in here, so that's about 8 apiece. That's not too bad. So here's some that's just now coming on, and they don't have the color of these guys right here. And I'm waiting on this vine to die out at the top, and that'll let me know that they're starting to get ready to pick. You can see they're dying off, but when this little stem starts turning brown and you can't scratch this butternut squash with your fingernail, that lets you know they're ready to go, ready to be picked. Here's our lettuces in containers. It's been so hot into the 90s. I moved them up on the front porch to get them out of the sun, but you can see they're already starting to bolt. Now this is an iceberg lettuce, not a leaf lettuce, but we've been eating the leaves off of them. And it's just these 90s. It just, it's turned them into a flower now instead of producing a head. So we'll eat a few more leaves off of these guys, and I'll go ahead and pull these and put some leaf lettuce right back in its place around the 1st of September, because your lettuce is like a cooler climate. That's why they do well early in the spring. And we'll go back with some leaf lettuces when it starts to cool down. Here's our sweet potatoes. They're taking over. I'm having to get in here and cut the vines back. You can see it's about to block my walk path through the back gate here. So I'm amazed. We plant here every 2 years with our sweet potatoes. We amend the soil in this bed with organic nutrients, bone meal, blood meal, what else did we put in? Worm castings and grass clippings and composted leaves, and basically it's growing in a mini compost pile, so they're doing great. We've had to cut this butternut squash back because it just kept growing so far out into the yard over there and all the way up underneath my truck. So I just got tired of having to step on these vines when we tried to walk through the gate, so I cut it all back pretty hard. And we got a few in this plant. It's not going to produce, I don't think, as well as the ones out front, but you can see it. Let me get in there. You can see we got 1 or 2 hanging in there. I can't get back through there because these sarpomira plants shoot potato plants. These sarpomiras we planted early in the season, and they're just, you can't even see the containers anymore. I'm having to put strings up to kind of hold them off of the rows of chia we planted for a cover crop, and they're amazing. If you've never tried to grow sarpomiras, you ought to give them a try. When these things die off and die back, we'll do a harvest video on those. I'm hoping that we get some potatoes out of it, not a bunch of potato leaves, but we'll see. We had to make some T-posts, excuse me, to trellis up some of these volunteer tomato plants we got from my friends. They just took off on me, and I know they're indeterminate variety. I put strings up, and now I've been cutting out all the suckers, but I've been working and hadn't been out here in the garden as much, and I come out here this morning and I had to take a bunch of suckers out of these plants. But you can see they're beautiful little, like, grape clusters of tomatoes on these guys, and these are a little cluster tomato, different variety. You can see the tomatoes are different. There's our butternut squash there. If you can see that little one up in there growing. We got 4 or 5 on this plant. This was put on a, if you don't follow the channel, I used an old garden swing that was set at the curb to make a trellis out of. And this thing, it's only one plant in there, and that thing's just massive. It's taking over. There's one right there. Let's see if I can, the big one's right in there. If you can see it, it's kind of green, so it's kind of blending in. So that thing's just, I've counted about 6 or 8 of them in there. Let me back up so you can really see how big this thing is. Here's our halcinator plants. These things are just loaded with tomatoes. And I got to get in here and pick some today. I got to pick them because if I let them get too much redder on the vine, usually the ones on the bottom, I come out here and the possums have eaten the bottoms out of them. So we'll get in here and get some of these picked, and you can see how nice these guys are. And they ain't even started to turn red yet. So we've got some of them almost the size of softballs in there on the other plants. So they're doing great. Our carrots are doing good. They're starting to come on with these higher temp days. They were slow to start, but now once we hit the high 80s and these 90s, they're doing great. I fertilized our blueberries and they're starting to come out of their little funk, but we're done with picking them for the year. Here's a little tomato in this cage. It's not doing as well as the ones in the ground, but I grew potatoes in this pot earlier in the year, then went ahead and just threw an extra tomato plant in there, and it's making tomatoes. I think what I'm going to do is cut off some of these bad limbs and just cut the tops out of this plant and let these that are on the bottom finish up, and we'll be done with it. This is a volunteer off one of those plants up front. I went to pull the sucker out of it. It was in the ground at the base of the plant. When I pulled it up, there's a nice little root ball on there, so I planted it in this container where we had our squash, or our cucumbers rather, and it's taken off. This is where we had our giant cabbages. We've already amended this bed back with blood meal and bone meal and rabbit manure and the old leaves. There's some, I ran the lawnmower over the old leaves and cut them up pretty good, composted them down pretty good, and just turned them into the soil there. So we'll be ready for next year. We're trying to get the bed ready for next year's planting. Here's our sunflower. It topped out at 12 foot tall, right around 12 foot. It was taller before it started leaning over with this nice big old head on there. That one's got multiple flowers on it, so I trimmed out some of the lower flowers to try to get these bigger at the top. But this one has only got one flower, and it's looking pretty nice. Down at the base of this thing, let's see, you can see that's doing really well. Our blackberries are done for the year, so I cut out a lot of the old canes, and they're just not doing as well this year as they've done in past years. But we still got, I think, 6 gallons of berries off of these plants. And we went ahead and planted some, when we lost our tomatoes up front on the side of the house in the boxes, we planted some more of these halcinators and right here, and you can just, they're loaded, man. If you've never tried this variety, I suggest you give it a try. They're easy to grow, and they load your plants up with a lot of tomatoes, and this plant is only like 3 foot tall. Here's one a little taller, and you can see the sizes of tomatoes on there. And fortunately this year we haven't had any issues with blossom end rot. We've had in past years, but this year the Lord's been good to us, and we amended the soil heavy with calcium last year, so maybe that's why. We've got some ginger in here. It's hard to see, I know. I planted the ginger in the shade underneath between the blackberry plants, and it's starting to do nice now that these 90s hit. It's growing up through the blackberry vines. You can see that. This fence here, this wire is probably right around getting close to 4 foot tall, and this ginger's growing up to 4 foot tall. Down there's the ginger plants, so we'll see how well that does. There's another halcinator plant. It's loaded with tomatoes down in there. Sorry, moved so fast, didn't mean to make it dizzy. And you can see. So over here we had some blackberry plants, and we lost the canes 2 years in a row, and we just got tired of messing with it. So I went ahead and dug them out, and I traded the plants that we have plenty of, and I make more blackberry plants every year with our tip rootings anyway. I dug them out. I got the soil ready for probably going to plant either tomatoes or peppers in this spot next year. We didn't do well on our giant Marconis this year. I love to grow those things, but we lost all our plants this year. So I put in this soil, I dug the old blackberries up. I put some peat moss in there. Actually, it was Pro Mix. Some rabbit manure, some earthworm castings, some bone meal, some blood meal, and some wood ash. We burned a lot of wood that we had our tree cut down. Back there's that pallet stacked up. There's still a rick of wood there. We'll burn it in our barbecue grill, and just to have wood ash. And we'll put that in the garden too. That helps with your potassium. And we're going to plant either tomatoes or probably giant Marconis here next year. And hopefully they'll do a lot better here than, especially with never being planted here other than the blackberries. So we'll see. Here's our another halcinator plant in this cooler, and you can just, man, I'm amazed at the tomatoes that this thing is putting on. And these are big tomatoes too. These are nice slicing tomatoes. I've actually had to add more stakes and more string around it because it's just getting, well, right now it's topping out over 5 foot on this guy. So hopefully it don't keep growing too much taller. If it does, I might probably have to cut the tops out of them. And our beans, we picked so many beans, and now these yellow beans are coming on again. My wife picked these things 3 days ago, and now they're ready to be picked again. We'll probably have to end up giving some away. I just canned up some beans yesterday, some of these yellow beans and some of these green beans over here. Our potatoes are starting to turn yellow. These are Yukon Golds, and I'm going to let these guys die back. I plant a late July the 1st, we plant a second planting of Yukon Golds. And what that does is, here in central Indiana, they'll finish up before it starts getting cold. And then I'll leave them in the ground probably, I don't know, October. And then I'll pull them, and then that'll be our seed potatoes to start next year. Here's this 2 rows of supposedly was Bush Blue Lake green beans, but you can see here that's not a bush. Let's see, where's it at? We had beans like this, which is a regular green bean shape, and then we've got these plants that turn really tall. They've got a different kind of bean on them altogether. I can't find, there it is. It's like a flat pod bean. See, it's totally different. It's not round. It's kind of, when the ones we've picked that were larger look like a pea variety, some kind of pea. So they obviously screwed up at Burpee, which I've heard in the comments a lot of people are having problems with their stuff not being labeled right. And these were supposed to be bush beans, and they turned into pole beans. So we'll just pick what we can, and what don't get finished when the plants start dying back, we'll just rip them out of the ground, and that'll be it. But she's pulled beans off of these plants 3 times now, and they're ready to pick again. So they're as prolific as the yellow beans, but there's just a mixture in there. And right here's one of our halcinators that was left from the first round, and it's about to peter out. I think we've still getting little tomatoes, but it's dying out heavy on the bottom. So I may go ahead and just chop the top out of this plant and force all that energy Right there, I got to tie up that vine. That just fell down about 3 days ago. It was up. Now it's laying on the ground. I got to get that up off the ground. Let's see, we got our, you can look there, that's another row of sweet potatoes, the same Georgia Jet that we've got in the driveway over there. And these guys are taking over. I keep having to push the limbs or the vines out of the walk path there, so now I'm just walking around the other way. Here's 2 other boxes of our Yukon Gold potatoes that we planted for a late harvest. We'll pick these also around October, and that'll be our seed potatoes for next year. And let me see if I can walk without stepping on a lot of these vines. Here's our second planting of a butternut squash. We lost our first plant in some storms early in the season. You can see this thing, the stalk on that bad boy is getting huge. And it's just filled in this trellis and my fence all the way across. And right here's some carrots we planted in a container. They're doing great. And there's some carrots we planted into small pots. I think they're like 2-gallon pots, maybe even 3, I don't know, maybe 2 to 3 gallon pots. And they're doing great. And I was out here this morning cutting some of these chili peppers back off of these plants. We've already harvested one harvest off of them, and you can see how many we've cut there, and you can see this plant is just loaded. It's just it's full of them. We got the seeds from our neighbor. She's Asian, and she said these were some of the hottest chilies that they had ever grown. So we don't do a lot of hot stuff. I was just going to do it to maybe as a novelty plant, but then it started doing so well, I told my wife we'll just harvest these chilies and dehydrate some. We've dehydrated a lot in there, and I'm getting ready to do a video on how we're going to make our chili powder. I'll just get the blender out, and after they're real good and dry, take the seeds out of them and blend them up and put them back in our chili powder jar. So just a little update on our garden and how things are doing. If you like the channel, give us a thumbs up on the video, and feel free to share and subscribe. And as always, thanks for watching.